Hi everyone. I see that we have quite a few joining us already. So thank you very much for joining us today. We know your time is valuable. So we are really glad that many of you could make it for today's session. So for today, we will actually be focusing on updates, practical guidance, as well as tips and tricks, especially around Spain's digital nomad visa for the UAE, especially what we're currently seeing in applications, mga common issues that come up, and how, of course, to position your application more strongly. So, this webinar is really meant to be a little bit more informative and practical, and it won't be individualized legal advice, but at least it would give you clarity to better understand what you can do, what you cannot do, or what to avoid. And after the main discussion, we will have a Q&A session. So as we go along the webinar, you can drop your questions and we will address all of them at the end of the session. So if we're not able to get every question live, we will really try, but don't worry as there will still be information shared on how to book a consultation as well as access resources after the call. Okay. Okay, so I think we should be able to start already directly, and anyone else can just join us as we move forward. And if you are watching this in the future on live replay, then feel free and still welcome as well. Okay, so for today, our agenda will be that we will first, of course, talk about your eligibility from the UAE. And there will be two routes available. You can either use it as your UAE freelance or trade license or other proof of self-employment. We will, of course, also talk about the income requirements, especially how they relate to the UAE, document legalization requirements, the application timeline, and bringing your dependents, the tax considerations and residency and citizenship path, and common pitfalls that most UAE applicants have experienced and how you can avoid it, and of course our Q&A session. Okay, so if you're new here, hello, we're Lakbyte and we were founded back in 2023. And since then, we've helped over 800 individuals move to Spain on the digital nomad visa. So these individuals come from the countries or are nationals from the countries to the right side. But as mentioned, we do have a lot of applicants from the UAE. We also have a lot of applicants from the US, the Philippines, and Canada. But today, our focus will really be on those that are coming from the U. So, ever since the change in the requirements, we have seen that most of the applicants now will prefer, and we always recommend that it's always going to be simpler if you apply from within Spain. We still have applicants who apply from consulates abroad, but it is now very minimal, and the bulk of these applicants are those family members who are joining the main applicant after the main applicant has already been approved. Okay. Now, this webinar is for you if you are a Filipino or you're an expat professional that is currently working in the UAE, whether that's in Dubai or Abu Dhabi, and you are looking for a way to move to Spain on the digital nomad visa. So, if you're a remote worker employed by a foreign company, if you're a freelancer with a UAE trade or freelance license, if you're an employee looking to transition to contractor status, and of course for your entire family that's planning to relocate to Spain together. It's not here, but also if you're a business owner, if you own a business in the UAE, it is also possible for you to undergo this route. Okay. So first, let's always talk. I always start with this because it really is the most basic requirement that you will have to make sure that you meet. So one is that you must already be working remotely, or you must be in a position or in a role that allows you to work remotely. Two is that you have already been with your employer or with your client for at least 3 months at the time that you apply. And three, the company that you are working for must have been established for at least 1 year or registered for at least 1 year. Now, let's talk about UAE specific eligibility. So, across our consultations, the number one confusion is always because of the fact that there is no social security agreement covering remote workers between Spain and the UAE. And if you are an employee in the UAE, this is a problem because you would not be able to apply directly for the visa unless your company actually sets up a formal structure in Spain. So, what most of our clients from the UAE do is that they transition and apply as a freelancer instead. So there are basically two main routes for UAE-based applicants under the freelance category. So the first route is, of course, if you are in the UAE, you will really have to obtain either a freelance license or a trade license of some sort. Okay, so that's the first option, and we will talk about that more in detail in the next slide. The second option is, I would say, a workaround. It's showing other self employment routes. So, for example, for Philippine nationals, it's going to be SSS contributions or BIR registration back home. For other nationals, similar, it's going to be some sort of self employed registration in your home country or some tax returns. Okay. Now, please note that this route 2 is a workaround that's currently being accepted, but technically it isn't the most correct way. So this can always be closed in the future. If you really want to make sure that your application will go through without any worry, we really highly recommend that you do it via option 1. Okay? Okay, so let's talk about option 1 or route 1. So using your UAE freelance or your trade license. So for the UAE, one of the biggest changes for the digital nomad visa, if you're applying from the UAE, is that you actually have to show proof that you are registered as self employed in the country of origin or in the country of provenance. Now, what this means is that you have to show either a freelance license, a trade license, free zone registration, e-trader license. There are many different options that are available to you to use. Um, to prove self-employment registration. For other countries, it's easier because they can always just provide a tax return showing that they're self-employed. But for the UAE, since this isn't applicable, it's usually going to be one or any of these licenses. Okay. Now, another caveat that we've commonly seen from UAE applicants is that, as mentioned, trade licenses will work, but what common complication is that the name of the main applicant is also on the license. So sometimes that can also be an issue. And if you actually apply this way with a trade license, but your name is on the license, it depends. If you are working for a company or providing freelance services to a separate company, then that is fine. So you will present your trade license and that company's trade license or that company's registration. So it's going to be you and then an external company. However, if, for example, it's your own company that you want to accredit and the trade license will show that it's your name on there, that's when it becomes a more complicated application. It's still possible, we've done it, but again, it really increases the number of documents that you have to provide. Okay. So for the client company age, meaning the company that you are providing services to, which can be a third party or your own company, that company must be established or registered for at least 1 year. Remember how I said earlier that the company or employer that you have to work for will have to be established for at least 1 year. But your trade license showing that you are self employed or registered as self employed must be only 3 months. It doesn't also have to be 1 year. It's just that the company that you provide services for has to be 1 year, but your own trade license that can be valid for just 3 months, right? Now, cost alert here. If you are doing it properly through the UAE for your initial registration of your trade license, freelance license, e-trader license, you have to budget at least around 4,000 to 6,000 dirhams for this based on what we've seen from our applicants. And that's only for the initial registration. You have to mature that for 3 months, and you will also have to legalize that later on. And because it's a commercial document, that's going to cost at least 2,000 dirhams. We'll talk about the legalization process later on. Now, route 2, as I mentioned, it's still proving that you are self employed, but this is a workaround. And again, I caution that as of this moment, this is still possible. We've been getting approvals through this. Since it's a workaround, we're not sure if it will ever close as an alternative. For example, you are in the UAE and it's not possible for you to obtain a freelance license. Again, I must emphasize that it is really our preferred and recommended route because it really is more straightforward. But what we have also been able to do is, if, for example, you're a Filipino, we have also successfully um, had clients approve where they showed registration with the BIR as self employed individuals or with the SSS showing contributions as self employed or voluntary. For other nationalities, because we also have a lot of applicants who are, for example, Pakistani, Iranians, who are residents of the UAE, they have also been able to get approved using tax returns from their own country to prove that they are registered as self-employed. That's also fine. Others have also shown proof of self employment registration from their home country. Now, remember again, this proof of self employed registration, whether it's a trade license, whether it's from your home country, it always has to be at least for 3 months. Okay. Okay, so those were the two routes, especially important with all the new changes that the WHO has implemented this year. Now let's talk about another core requirement, which is your qualification. You must prove that you are qualified for the remote role or the role that you currently hold, and that you will use to apply. So there are two paths. You can either use a degree or professional experience. Let's talk about degree first. So for degree, what you will need is either a bachelor's or postgraduate, a master's, a PhD degree, and that degree certificate must be apostilled, right? A common issue that comes up is if you have a regulated degree. So if you're a psychologist, a lawyer, an architect, a civil engineer, or similar, usually they will ask you to sign a declaration renouncing the practice of your profession in Spain. And this one is also a tricky criteria because the UHE has flip-flopped on this quite a bit. So there are months that they go ahead and just accept the signed declaration. And then there are some months where they say that it's not accepted and you have to go through the long route of homologating your degree. So it really depends. This visa is constantly changing still. So this is something that we also really take a look at. So if you have a regulated degree, it's best if you consult with someone or consult with Lakbyte to make sure that your application is protected. Okay, so the other way of proving that you are qualified for the digital nomad visa is by proving that you have 3 years of professional experience. Note that this doesn't have to be specifically remote experience. It can be experience even if you've done it in person, even if you've done it in other countries. It doesn't matter. It just has to be 3 years of experience related to the role that you are currently doing. So, for this, to prove experience, you always have to provide two documents. So, the first document is, of course, the certificate of employment or the certificate of experience showing that, for example, Marian worked with us from 2022 to 2025 in this role. These were her responsibilities, etc. So basically, it's a certificate showing what you actually did and how it relates to your current role. However, it's not enough that you just present that certificate because any certificate is very easy to obtain. You also have to show official government proof showing that it is legitimate experience, right? So if you work back home in the Philippines as an employee, there are documents for that. As long as there are tax and social security records, then that is something we can obtain. But let's talk about UAE specific documents. If you are engaged or if you were previously engaged under a company that was registered with the MORE, then the official employment record is usually easy to obtain. It's a straightforward document that we have used for quite a bit of our clients. So that one is that is good news if you have a history or if you're currently working for a company under the MORE. The more difficult ones are if you are working for a company that's registered under any of the free zones, because normally or most free zones don't keep a central registry of the individuals as well as the positions that they hold. So these kinds of applications are a little bit more complicated sometimes. And again, we'll have to look at what is possible to prove your experience for you. Another alternative, if you are a Filipino applicant specifically, there are DMW certificates or the Department of Migrant Worker certificates that we can obtain. However, this of course hinges on whether you've been properly registered. So, if you have an overseas exit clearance or documents that you've registered with a DMW, then these certificates will actually be available to show that you were doing these kinds of positions for the relevant year. So this ones we've successfully had submitted for several of our applicants from the UAE, and they were approved with no requests for additional documents. Now, on top of the experience, another document that is also commonly, not commonly, it is really a required document is the police clearance. So there are normally two types of police clearances available. So there's one from Dubai, and that one is usually valid for 3 months. And there's also one from the Ministry of Interior. The only thing is that that one is usually valid for 1 month. And the process of legalizing in the UAE can take a while. So first is you get your actual document from the UAE, so that can be your UAE police clearance or your trade license, and then you have to bring that to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for attestation. And after the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, you still have to bring that to the Embassy of Spain in Abu Dhabi for legalization or consularization. So it's a two-step process versus if you have a document coming from a country, from an apostille country where it's just the initial document and then you just bring it to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of that country. Here, because it's the UAE is not part of the apostille convention, you have to first bring it to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and then the Embassy of Spain in Abu Dhabi. Okay. Now, again, let's talk about document legalization because this is where a lot of our clients also struggle with initially. So, again, it's not apostille if it's from the UAE. It's first MOFA attestation plus Spanish embassy legalization. And note that the embassy, to get your documents legalized at the embassy, you will have to book an appointment at the Embassy of Spain in Abu Dhabi. And usually, these appointments book out 1 to 2 months out. I checked earlier today and there are even no appointments available. So normally what clients will have to do is either engage a service provider who has booked an appointment or who is able to help assist with this, especially if you lack some time. Now, Philippine documents, if you are a Filipino, there are certain documents that you will have to obtain. So, for example, birth certificates, marriage certificates, if you are bringing family members. And now this can be done completely online. So, you don't have to worry about going home. And that e-apostille version can be validly used for your application. Next is educational credentials. If you graduated from a country where it is part of the Apostle Convention. So, for example, if you got the degree from the US, from the Philippines, for example, from Germany, then the degree has to be apostilled. But it has to be apostilled in the country where your school is a resident of. So, it cannot be legalized in the UAE. It has to be legalized back in the country where your school was based in. And note as well that if you are coming from the Philippines, if you graduated from a private and a public university, the process is also a little bit different. And of course, all your documents will have to be translated into Spanish by a sworn translator registered with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Spain. Now, another thing is getting a Spanish embassy appointment. This leads into, well, both the Schengen visa application as well as if you wanted to try and apply for the DNV from the UAE, which we do not recommend and which we will talk about in the next slides. Okay, so let's talk about timeline. How long will it take before you can actually apply, submit, and actually get a DNV from the UAE? So there are always two main phases that I say. There's always the document preparation phase and then the government processing phase. So for most of our clients, for document preparation, I would always suggest around 2 to 3 months so that you aren't in a rush and you can still, especially like most of our clients are have full-time jobs and they're also very busy. So normally we say 2 to 3 months. It can be compressed into 1 to 2 months, but then you're really just focus on your application, doing or getting documents every day, so that it is a bit of a rush. So we always say 2 to 3 months, and we also recommend that we are engaged if you need assistance, actually 3 to 6 months before your move, so that we can already properly arrange the timeline, what documents to get, what you need to prepare ahead of time. The other thing is, if, for example, you still don't have a license or any proof of self employed registration, you have to wait for that to mature for at least 3 months before you apply. Okay. Another thing, if you need to obtain a Schengen visa to fly to Spain to apply, you can also apply 6 months before traveling, because, anyways, you can indicate the date of your travel, of your planned travel to Spain. And this is also another common issue with the UAE, because it is super difficult to obtain slots in the different embassies. You aren't simply limited to Spain. You can also get it from any other embassy. But again, from feedback from clients, it's always difficult to get a slot there. So this one you can already start ahead. Now, so you fly to Spain, we submit your application. How long does it take for the government to actually decide on the application? So it's a strict 20 working day period, which in real month time is around 1 month. So let's say, for example, you fly here this month, very likely by next month, you will already have a visa decision. And that is simply because if they don't act on your application within the requisite timeline, then you will then be considered approved by administrative silence, which means that because they didn't act on it in time, then you will receive an approval. Okay. And then after your approval, you will then have to go to process your residence card, and that will take up to 20 to 40 additional working days. Again, this is where I always caution my clients to set expectations, because to obtain the residence card, you have to get two appointments. The first appointment is for your fingerprinting at the police station, but that appointment is always a challenge to get, because it's a first come, first serve basis, and a lot of stations release appointments randomly. Okay. And then 20 to 30 days after, you will then have to go back to the same police station to pick up your card, but you also need another appointment. And of course, if you are a Lakbyte client, that is our problem booking the appointments for you, and you'll just have to show up. Now, for when you have to be physically present in Spain, you have to be physically present in Spain on submission day. And usually we ask our clients to be here for at least 3 working days, because the system sometimes goes down. So usually we're able to submit as long as you arrive before 3 p.m. or send us the last documents before 3 p.m. We submit on the same day, on the same working day. If not, we submit on the next working day. Other times that you have to be physically present in Spain, especially for UAE clients, because it's very common, because the UAE is so close, that they just fly in and then submit and then fly out and wait in the UAE for their decision. But note that this also depends on whether you have a single or a multiple entry Schengen visa. Okay. The other times that you have to be physically back here is, of course, when you come over, when you're approved, and then for your fingerprinting appointment for your residence card at the police station, and to also retrieve your residence card itself. You cannot allow anyone and a power of attorney to retrieve it on your behalf. It has to be you to come back. Okay. Now let's talk very quickly about dependents and who you can bring. So you can always bring your spouse or your unmarried partner, your children, whether these are minors or adult children, up to 25 or 26 years old, and your dependent parents. Now, please note that the more dependents that you bring, the higher the threshold of income that you will have to prove, right? And common issues again that we've been seeing for our applicants from the UAE, if, for example, it's a Filipino family and your child was born outside the Philippines and not registered with the PSA, then the obtaining the duplicate birth certificate from the UAE can sometimes take time. Whereas if they were already properly registered with the PSA, you can do it completely online. So if you haven't yet, I would also recommend starting this early. Another thing is unmarried couples from the UAE. We've had a few, but I can very well tell you now that it's always one of the most challenging applications for the UAE specifically. At Lakbyte, we are actually the firm that really specialize in unmarried couples early on, even when others were not accepting or saying it wasn't possible. And generally, it's a straightforward application, except if you come from countries like the UAE, where it's difficult to prove cohabitation documents. So this one is also a tricky application. So if you are at the point in your relationship that you can get married, then an online marriage certificate could work. If not, then that one really has to be checked on how it's possible to do it, based on our experience before. And then this one also very common, especially now, in March and April, because of what's happening. We have had a lot of dependents who are added, because of the situation. So it's fine. You can apply together with your dependents at the same time, and you can also just apply and add them afterwards. Not an issue. Okay. So this one, we also get a lot of questions on this during our consultation, and it's really the tax because, of course, as you all know, in the UAE, there's no income tax imposed, whereas in Spain, it's a graduated tax rate. So it's going to be a rate between 19 to 47% of your income, but most people are at the 20 to 30% range, depending on how much you earn. There's also a common misconception that I want to correct. So there is a 183-day rule. It's a general rule which effectively says that if you have spent more than 183 days in a year, in Spain, then you would be considered a tax resident of Spain and that you would be required to pay taxes here. However, this is not the only criteria that you have to think, because some of those who come on the DNV assume incorrectly that it's only after they've been 183 days here that they have to sign up and pay for tax, which isn't the case. If you are approved, so let's say, for example, again, you fly this May and then you get approved in June. After approval, you have to immediately sign up as autonomo, which means that you have to sign up for taxes and social security. And from that point onward, in the next quarter of capture, you will then be start paying your taxes. Now, another thing for timing, if it's also a consideration, is if you arrive before July, again, because very likely for the rest of the year you will be spending more than 183 days in Spain and you will be considered a tax resident of Spain for 2026, for example, then you would also be liable for taxes on income earned from January to July, even if that was earned outside Spain. Okay, versus if you arrive after July, then you would be only liable for income that is earned while you're physically here in Spain, because you would normally be considered not a tax resident. Other things is if you, of course, you are considered a tax resident this year because you flew early and you sell property, that capital gains on that property sale will also be taxable in Spain. So most of our applicants move either towards the end of the year or at least after mid July. Now, again, as I mentioned, once you are here in Spain, once you're approved, you're required to sign up and pay for taxes and social security. And these are paid quarterly for your taxes and then on an annual basis. Whereas for social security, these are paid monthly. And of course, to make it very clear for you what your possible obligations are, we do highly recommend consulting a Spanish tax advisor before you move. We do have recommendations that we share with our clients, and we actually also have a webinar in around 2 weeks with one of our tax contacts. Okay, so this one is the long-term path, and it's probably the most common refrain that I hear from our clients when we have a consultation. The fact that in the UAE, even if they've been there or if you've been there for 15, 16 years, there isn't really a long-term permanent path. So for most of our clients, this is really what the goal, which is, of course, citizenship. So this is the general timeline. Without special consideration. So the initial DNV, especially if you apply for it from within Spain, is issued for at least 3 years. At the end of the 3-year period, you can then renew that for an additional 2 years. And then afterwards, you can apply for long-term residency after those 5 years. However, for most Filipinos or those who are Ibero-American nationals, what will happen is because you receive it for an initial 3 years, because we have the accelerated path to citizenship after the first 2 years. So after the first 2 years of the 3 years authorization, you will then already be eligible to apply for citizenship. It is possible, but that you will still have to renew though, because while your citizenship application is pending, you have to make sure that you maintain valid residency. But of course, it's so much faster than the 10-year period that most of other nationals will have to do. Another common timing issue that we see here is we also have a lot of foreign nationals who are married to Filipino partners coming from the UAE. So theirs is a little bit, they don't have to do the 10 years. So normally what will happen is that the Filipino applicant will apply for citizenship after 2 years. And then as a spouse of a Spanish national, because that Filipino citizen will then become a Spanish citizen, as a spouse of a Spanish citizen, they will also, that foreign national who normally would have to reside in Spain for at least 10 years, will then only have to show 1 year of residency on top, and then they can also apply for citizenship. So that's also a common permutation that we're seeing. And of course, for citizenship, you have to get the language and the cultural exam. And this one, it's not a requirement, but I always recommend that you do it because it can only help you. So if you can have some Spanish classes before you move, that would really help, at least in your day to day or even interacting with people, with everyone here. It will just make your life easier. So a common recommendation that we suggest is Instituto Cervantes, which is the official Spanish language partner of the government of Spain. You can do it online. There are slots sometimes in Manila. It is sometimes cheaper, but that is a recommendation that we get. There are also websites like Italki, Preply online, where you can do one-on-one sessions with certain Spanish speakers, and this is actually what a lot of those who are preparing for their DELE exam are doing right now, because we have quite a few already that we've submitted citizenship applications for, or that they're gearing up to submit their citizenship. So of course they're preparing their DELE exam. Okay, so we will spend a little bit of time here because these are the common pitfalls that we see our UAE applicants go through. So again, I mentioned earlier the Ministry of Interior police clearance. It's possible to use it. It's fine. It's just that it actually is. It can. It's just a short validity, so you have to time everything well, like the attestation, the consularization, and the actual application. Another thing is trying to apply from the UAE via BLS. For one, it's very difficult to obtain slots. There are very, very limited slots that are released, and of course, it's difficult to obtain them. You also only get the 1 year visa that you if versus if you fly to Spain on a tourist visa, or if you have a Schengen free entry passport, then you get the 3 years immediately. Another thing, if you apply via the BLS, is that it can take a while to receive a decision, and requirements, as with many consulates, in our experience, they can be very random, like on what they will require for you extra. Another thing is estimating the timelines for document legalization in the UAE. So as I mentioned earlier, because the UAE is not an apostle country, you have to first bring it to the MOFA and then the Embassy of Spain in Abu Dhabi. The MOFA is generally fast and straightforward. It's the second step for consularization at the embassy in Abu Dhabi that can really trip most people up. Other concern is usually if you are an employee under the free zone and trying to prove your legitimate experience from those companies during the years that you were there, especially if, for example, you are a dependent, a family dependent, or someone on a golden visa. These are the normal issues that those kinds of face. Then number five, this one also very common. If you're from the UAE, you will be familiar that the work that you actually do and the what's actually indicated on your visa is different. So you could actually be working as a uh, how would I say, as a marketing specialist, but then what's on your visa is like layout designer. So it's also common. So that also can cause an issue because of the mismatch and how you prove your 3 years of experience related to the current role that you do. Because, for example, your current role is again marketing specialist, and it shows marketing specialist indeed, but then all your previous roles are completely unrelated because you had to meet or your company had to meet a visa quota or over shot their visa quota for that specific role. So that is also a challenge on how we work around those kinds of position. And lastly, this one is a challenge but not as common, is of course if not registering a child with the PSA ahead of time, which can, of course, cause preventable delays. Now, let's talk about costs. So, if you want our assistance, of course, you would have to pay our fee. We have a package where we assist you, and we also have a package where we assist you. Plus, we have unlimited translations for your Spanish for your documents. If you apply in Spain, the government fee per person is 73.26 euros for the application fee. For the UAE license, for your client and for your own license, you have to budget at least 2,000 dirhams because it is a commercial document. And then, of course, you have apostille, legalization, retrieval of your documents. You also have to budget for that separately. And of course, if you engage Lakbyte to help you with your application, we also have payment installment plans available. So you can always ask that during your consultation. Okay, so we are at the almost at the end before we start our Q&A. So we always start with a consultation. It's we really want to meet all that we uh, assist before we actually engage. So it's either me or a Lakbyte team member. So right now my calendar is booked, I think, until the end of May, but a Lakbyte team member is able to assist immediately for consultation within 2 or 3 days immediately. So if you're in a rush or if you want to get a move on, um, he is also very well capable and is also at this point very familiar with UAE applications, because I can tell you that a majority of our April applications, I would say maybe 70% of all the consultations that we did in April was really for UAE applicants. And that's actually why we also thought about doing this webinar, because we really see that there was just so many who wanted to move to Spain under this pathway. And of course, once you're engaged, you will get a personalized document checklist based on your route and your profile. But if you're not yet there, you're still exploring and looking at your options. We do have two communities. We have a Facebook community specific to Filipinos who want to move on the digital nomad visa, and we also have a WhatsApp community that's available for Filipinos as well as all other nationalities, as there is a channel there that is in English. So if you have any questions, you can look at our website, lakbyte.com, or send us an email at info@lakbyte.com. Our opening hours are Monday to Friday, 8 to 5 p.m. Spain time. So usually we respond within 24 business hours, because of course we are also trying to get to all of your emails so that we can guide you properly. Okay. So without further ado, at this point, we will move into the QE portion of the webinar. So for those of you that have already submitted questions in the chat, that we will get through them one by one. We will start with those. If you have not yet posted your questions, you may also do so now, so that we can get to the questions as well. And also, a quick reminder that the answers provided are general in nature and meant for informational purposes. If you have an individual case, we do strongly recommend that you get on a consultation so that we can talk about your circumstances, documentation, and timing. So, I will try my best to address all the questions, as many questions as possible, at the while we are doing the Q&A. So with that, let us begin with the first question. Where can you watch this session later? So if you signed up and you are joining, then this session will be available as a link to your email. So you don't have to save anything. This is also now streamed live on our Facebook and our YouTube pages. So you would be able to see it from there. Where to book a consultation? You can go to lakbyte.com consultation. Here, let me share the link in the group chat. So you have options there. So you have consultation with me, a consultation with a Lakbyte team member, or a rush consultation with myself as well for the weekend. Birth certificate and marriage contract is issued and apostilled last December 2025. Can I use it for application planning between July and August? No. So for all documents, they're only valid 6 months from their date of issue. So if it was issued in December, you can only use it up to an application in June. So you'll have to obtain a new one. But again, if you already have it, you can just do it online through the e-apostille. Need to MOFA and Spain attestation, my client business license and my license. Correct. So if it's both, if the companies, if your license is from the UAE and the company that you're working for is also from the UAE, then you have to legalize, meaning go for the MOFA plus Embassy of Spain attestation for both licenses. For adding a family member after a visa approval, do they have to apply for a visa at the embassy for countries where we need to get the visa to enter Spain? Okay, so this is a good question, and this is also a question that we get a lot. So when you add a family member, there are effectively two ways that you can do it. The first way is if they get a Schengen visa, fly to Spain and apply from Spain, similar to you, and this is the way that we normally recommend it. Then they just be under the same 20 working day period as yourself, and they can just be immediately added to your authorization. The second way, it's more complicated, but it's also been done successfully, is you contrary to the main applicant who really has to be in Spain at the time of the visa application, family dependents can actually be outside of Spain at the time of the application. So you can apply for them even if they are outside of Spain. However, because they were outside of Spain at the time of application, you have to activate that authorization through the local consulate where you reside. Meaning, you still have to go through BLS or the consulate to obtain a visa to fly to Spain, right? So that's the complication if you do it that way. So it's possible, especially if it's hard to get a Schengen visa for that family member, but it's complicated and similar, it can take months, but possible. I'm a resident in Saudi. Is it possible to get the license from the UAE with the same cost? So this is where it's a little bit complicated. Normally, we always say you have to get the license or proof of self-employed registration from the country of residence. If it's not possible to do so in Saudi, the workaround that we mentioned earlier is if you're possible to obtain it from a country of origin, so your country of nationality. Again, that is a workaround which is a little bit risky because it's technically not how it's supposed to be done. But if you are not a national of the UAE, I would suggest against this course of action. For family of three, how much is the updated income requirement? Wait, we did not discuss the income requirement. Let me see. Very strange. We did prepare a slide for this specifically, but it is not showing up. Okay, so for a family of three, wait, let me see if I can. Give me 1 second to try and look for this slide. Because we actually prepared one that actually showed the dirham equivalent. Okay, what I can do is I can just copy paste it here in the chat box. So here. So this is the equivalent for here we can show. So for an individual, you will have to show 2,849 euros. So which is around, if you round it up, 12,300 dirhams. For a family of two, it's 3,917 euros or around 16,900 dirhams. Oh, thank you, Range. Range has also replied. Thank you. And then for a family of three, that's 4,270 euros or 18,400 dirhams. For a family of four, that's 4,630 euros or around 20,000 dirhams. And of course, as you add more, then you'll keep adding as well. And then this equivalent is around, assumes an exchange rate of currently around 4.3 euros to dirham exchange rate. I have the a free zone license with a shareholder. Can we both use the license for the DNV application? Um, Depends on the percentage of ownership. Are you trying to use this license as your client, or are you trying to use the license as proof that you are registered as self-employed? The answer will differ based on that. I employed in the Philippines but working remotely here in Dubai under my wife's visa. What would be the best route for us to apply? Okay, this is a complicated application because remember, if you are an employee, whether that's in the Philippines or in Dubai, then you have to switch over and become a contractor to either the Philippine company or the company in Dubai. And we have to show that because for every application, you always have to remember that you have to provide three things: a contract with your client, a letter authorizing you to work remotely, and then the trade license or certificate of registration of that company. And that contract and that remote work letter must show that you are actually registered as self employed. So the best route would probably be to switch over and become a contractor to whichever jobs would meet the income requirement and then apply after that has been in place for at least 3 months. There are also some specific nuances to this kind of application, so it would be best to get on a consultation to see how it can be done properly. What about the school documents? It's been apostilled since 2024. Do I also need to obtain copies? So this is one of the things that also, actually, this is what I should have also included in the webinar. It's very common if you're from the UAE that you've already apostilled your school documents. So as long as it's already been apostilled, they're valid forever. So they don't expire. The only ones that you have to redo is if they were still red ribbon, because the Philippines only acceded to the Apostle Convention late in the 2020s. So as long as it's not red ribbon, but it's an actual apostille, you can use it. It does not expire. My visa is spouse visa. However, I'm working as a freelancer or VA working with international clients. Will there be any problem with processing the digital nomad visa? So, not an issue. You just have to show that you are, again, that you have some sort of freelance registration. But what is a little bit tricky is if you have a degree related to what you're currently doing. So, if you have a degree related to what you're currently doing, then again, it's not an issue. It might become an issue if you have to prove 3 years of experience related to your current role. Because remember, you must not only have to show the certificate of experience, but you also have to show the corresponding government documents showing that it is actually um, that this work during this time was legitimate. So that's where it might be an issue. Hello, will there be an issue if I'll be using it as a certificate for proof of self-employment, but my bank statement where client payments come in is my UAE bank? So this is where I was saying that right now it's being accepted as a workaround, but we don't know until when. So I always tell my clients that if you can go for the conservative route, really try that, because you are going to be spending thousands of pesos or thousands of dirhams on the move. So better to make sure it's as fail safe as possible. But I can confirm that right now we have had successful approvals on this. So one thing I would want to flag, this is just actually very recent. We presented an SSS certificate, but they were still asked for further proof of self-employment registration. So I don't know if it's a fluke or if it's something that they're not accepting. We're still seeing from our clients moving forward. My wife will be the main hi, Joseph. My wife will be the main applicant and her visa is housewife, but she already have a freelance license as an advertising. Will that be an issue? She'll be using her degree for the application. Not an issue. So it doesn't matter the visa that you hold in the UAE. What is important is that you have a freelance license that's been in issue for at least 3 months. And because you don't have to accredit via experience, you don't have to look for proof of experience from the UAE because you have a degree, then not an issue. Okay, can a family member apply later after I obtain the residence visa in Spain? Not an issue. They can apply with you or afterwards, doesn't matter. Did you mention on your slide that you can assist and obtain a trade license for an individual based in the UAE? We don't assist with it specifically, but we already have several company contacts who have done it for our clients. So if you're a client of ours, we will, of course, send you our recommendations on who you can tap and use for the application. Okay, can one add after the main applicant's approval while the family members are outside of Spain and need a visa? So yes, you can always add again as a follow-up answer. You can always add, but they either need a Schengen visa to fly here and apply. So that's option one. Or option two, even if they are outside of Spain, we can apply for their application. But this is again only applicable to dependents. Main applicant, you always have to fly here. We can apply for them while they're outside of Spain, but they have to finish the rest of the process through your local consulate or what do you call this, or BLS. So for example, a fellow consultant did it for Pakistan. I think for her it took around 8 months to get the dependent visa approval from the local authorities. Right now we have a lot of Philippine applicants and it the decisions are coming out pretty quickly, around 3 to 4 weeks if you are adding a dependent. It's again different if you're applying as a main applicant in the Philippines, but that is not the topic of today's webinar. For renewal, in case you change a client, do I still need to obtain the trade license of a new client and legalize or apostille it? Yes. So in the webinar in a conference with the UHET chief in February, he said that it wouldn't be necessary uh, if you remain with the same client. But based from applications we've done recently, you would still need it. And especially since you're changing a client, then yes, you would definitely need it. I have a digital nomad UAE, but you're still based in the Philippines. No ITR and not registered as a freelance permit. Do I require freelance permit somewhere? Yes, either in the Philippines or in the UAE. But if you are in the Philippines, just get the Philippine one. You can register with the BIR. It takes 1 day. It's 500 pesos versus like 4,000, 6,000 dirhams in the UAE. So best to do it there in the Philippines. Can we enroll our kids to public school? Is Spanish the medium communication? Or kids need to be enrolled? Okay. No, so if your kids are between the ages of 6 to 16, this is considered compulsory education for children. So you must definitely enroll your children. And even if you are just a resident, you can enroll your children in public school. Even those who are here illegally, their children are required to go to school. So no, there's no requirement that they are put in private. However, if they are in public school, of course, this is Spain, the language of instruction will, of course, be in Spanish. If they are from regions where there is a local language as well, so for example, in Barcelona, Catalan, in Valencia, Valenciano, then they would also have classes in that language. So it will, of course, depend on which area you choose to move to. But yes, it's going to be Spanish, but yes, you can also enroll them in public schools. Not an issue. Do you see a possibility of an increase in the salary requirement by next year? I cannot always predict the future, but based on historical trends, yes, because the minimum income requirement for the digital nomad visa is tied to the minimum wage in Spain, right? So if the minimum wage in Spain increases, then of course the requirement for the digital nomad visa will also increase. Historically, it's increased by 3 to 5%, and normally it's discussed in Parliament towards the end of December, January, and in the previous years, they've always issued the new updated requirement around February. So, safe answer would probably be yes, and then an estimate of a 3 to 5% increase. What is the cost for a one-on-one consultation? It's 50 euros. You can pay via card. It's through PayPal, but you can pay even if you have no PayPal account with a debit or credit card. Okay. Okay. So unless we have any more questions, I think we are good. We have last two questions, I feel. Okay. So there is someone with a flight. Um, on the May 31st and you have a trade license for 12 years, please give, oh, sorry, that is contains personal information. Feel free to send an email to info@lakbyte.com so that we can start. Or if you want to start immediately, just book a consultation on the website so that we can assess and help and then get you onboarded because that is already super tight for the timeline. Okay, we have a few follow-up questions. We still have time, so we will entertain these. Is it okay to have a freelance visa in Dubai, but all clients are outside Dubai? What will be the requirements for the DNB in that case? So no, definitely. So if, for example, you're residing in Dubai, that's why I said that you would normally get the freelance license there because that's where you are actually physically residing. But doesn't matter if your clients are from the US, the UK, that's completely fine. Okay. We obtain a free zone license for the proof of self-employment. I have a shareholder and can we both use it to apply? Equally divided. This one is a little bit tricky. We'll have to look at it specifically because usually it's either majority ownership or sole ownership for purposes of the trade license. Okay. For self-employed, can I use the trade license as an additional client? I'm the sole shareholder. Okay, this is a good question. So this is where I said earlier, it depends if you have a separate client that you are providing services for with their own trade license and your own trade license. So that one, it's simple, that's a straightforward application. But there are also applicants who will use their own trade license to apply. But we only recommend this if that trade license covers a business that is actually existing and operating because you will be asked for a lot of documents to prove that it's a legitimate business because now you're not proving that you're providing services to a separate company and receiving your remuneration in exchange of those services, but you will now have to prove that trade license where that is yours is a legitimate operating business, and that's why you can move to Spain on that license. So again, these are complicated applications. It's been done, but already setting expectations early that that is a complicated application. Working offshore in the UAE, 1 month on duty, 1 month off duty, is it possible to apply for the DNV? I would say no, because one of the requirements that they also made very explicit recently is that the position or the role that you have to use to apply for the DNV must be exclusively remote. So if you use this kind of position to apply for the DNV and you have to be physically in the UAE, then you would fail the exclusively remote requirement. And of course, if the ultimate goal is citizenship, then you might also fail the time that you need to remain here in Spain for purposes of citizenship by residency. Hi, Ivy. Okay, does the spouse of the DNV holder have the right to work? Yes. So all the adult dependents of other than the main applicant have a right to work in Spain. So they can be an employee, they can be self-employed, they can open their own business. So this applies to any of the adult dependents of the main applicant. Okay, so I guess we have gone through all the questions, and I would like to thank everybody for being very, very participative for today's webinar. If you're watching this in the future, I hope that you gain something for this. If you have further questions, feel free to book through the Lakbyte website, and we look forward to meeting you all here in Spain. Thank you so very much, everybody. Bye bye. Thank you.